So close. It's
Oh, there it is. Okay. Countdown. Okay, welcome everybody. It's 4 o'clock or thereabouts, Friday afternoon, Friday the 13th. For those of you who are superstitious, we'll try to do this on a fairly quick basis today. We're scheduled for 45 minutes. Hopefully we won't take more, it'll take a little less than that. Let's start by doing the Pledge of Allegiance, I guess. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball.
God save the King.
First, I'd like to say it's really nice to see everyone here. It's been a while, but glad to see we got the band back together. The first order of business is to review and approve the agenda for today. Ashley, can you screen share that for us, please?
10-4.
All right, have a good one.
I'm sorry, I have painters here and they're leaving.
not done screen share, Dave, so I'm sorry. Bear with me just a moment.
Sure. Do you want to switch it to me and I can do it, or is it okay?
I can do that if.
Yeah, go ahead. I've got it up, ready to share anyway. I am the host now. Okay. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so open ceremonies agenda, no minutes this time. Scheduling meetings coming up, and then our selection of a committee secretary. The main order of business is to review our current year-to-date budget performance, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about new revenue streams and how to start that discussion again. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as written?
I'll move to adopt the motion agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so there is a meeting that is scheduled for December 12th, I think. It's already on the calendar, but I have a conflict for that day. I wanted to see if there's an alternative we can come up with that most of the people can make. If we were to, Jill, here comes Jill. If we were to move that to a Saturday, does that pose any difficulty for anyone?
Which particular Saturday?
We could do it the day after, or we could do it the following Friday. I'm pretty flexible that way.
I haven't got my flying schedule yet, but I'm flexible, so.
So the 12th is the Saturday, correct?
Yeah, it's scheduled. The current schedule says the 11th, but I can't be there. I'll be traveling that day. So
Okay.
12th
12th is good with me.
no problem with me.
well, shall we do morning? And Ashley, can you coordinate still when we do it on Saturdays?
Certainly.
Okay. How
Dave,
about a morning on Saturday, something in the like 10 to 11 timeframe, or 10:30 thereabouts?
Dave, the earlier the better for me, if that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
10 to 11 sounds good to me.
10 to 11 sounds good to me, Lynn.
Everybody
Okay,
good?
Lynn.
Lynn
10 to
made the
11?
Lynn made the motion and I seconded it.
Good, going once, going twice, sold. 10 a.m. on December 12th. We'll have our next meeting, and then we'll figure out the next one after that in January. But we'll be back on a regular schedule. Just a quick question: in general, are Friday afternoons preferable, or Saturday mornings preferable for most of you?
Usually fine with me.
Either one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good one.
Anybody have a
Probably,
strong
probably a little
preference?
better.
So Friday afternoon, right before happy hour is still good for their most.
Yeah.
Good reason for happy hour.
There you go. Good reason to get out early, right? Okay, very good. So that takes care of the scheduling of the meetings. Anyone want to volunteer to be the committee secretary, which involves writing up meeting minutes? Habitually, I have done it, and I'm happy to continue if no one else feels strongly and would like to do it. But I'd be happy if someone would want to take that on. And the motion passes. I'll continue. Okay.
Dave, I think it's easier when you do it because you got a little better picture of the whole world and you can sort of condense it down.
And it
So-
doesn't take much time, and I usually do it closely following the meeting, so that'll be fine. Okay, very good.
We appreciate that. I appreciate that.
No problem at all. It's just, I get paid plenty to do this, so. All right, let's start with the financial data review. I'm going to bring up the October 2020 Financial Summary 2 document. Give me just a second. And I attended, or I listened to the portion of the commissioners meeting today in which they reviewed the budgetary stuff. Listened with great intent, and I think Jim gave a fairly good overview of the current situation without going into exhaustive detail. He essentially gave the highlights, and it is mostly about the transfer tax. I think Sheena also provided some backup information, and we all, I think, can see that the transfer tax is over the moon at the moment, and that's great. The accommodations tax is about 90% of budget. Excuse me for a second. Hey, Trish, can I close the door here? Sorry about that. The accommodations tax is fully 90%, and I assume that we think that we'll make up the difference in the April, March 15th, second portion of that, right? No, it would be March 15th, right? Is that when the second installment is due?
I think it's March, yes.
Yeah, so that would still make it into the end of year budget. Okay.
It's due April 15th, but a lot of individuals pay it early.
Okay, that's right, because it goes up till the end of March. In that case, we might not see it all, so we might actually be a little short there for the year to date. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Last I saw, we're about 90% overall of what was budgeted for the full year. The DBE income is up a little bit higher than I think we anticipate. If you look at the comparison to the full year budget, I think there's probably, not sure the exact reasoning for that, but I think we're at 97.5 and we are only scheduled to be at, let's see if I can move it here, 37.5 for the year. So, but that must be because the 37.5 is now in for the full 60,000, 5,000 a month portion of that. That makes sense. On the expense side, I know we're over on a few of the categories.
Dave,
Yes.
that 100,000 is the third amendment to the MAR compliance. On DBE.
Okay. And what did that result in as far as payment from them?
That it was something to meet the requirements of the MAR. They gave us 100,000 and it's sitting there nicely helping us.
Gotcha. So that's part of the additional revenue above and beyond. The one that I think Jim brought up at the commissioners meeting was the building permits are lower than we anticipate at the moment, but Jim, I think, said he thought that would probably catch up by the time we finish the year. And business licenses, I think, are low compared to budget, but they usually come in right before the end of the budget year anyway, right? So, okay, so revenue side, we're looking very good. On the expense side, I know that there are several overages here. Sheena, you had, in the extra sheet that you provided, you gave some information about that. What are the couple of main things that comprise the overages on the expense side?
A lot of it is the COVID expenses with the cleaning as well as the supplies. I got a letter yesterday from the state of Delaware, Office of Management and Budget, saying that there is a check of $17.5 thousand coming to me for expenses from part of that. We've got 35,000 coming from CJC, and we probably got another 15,000 that we'll get in January from the CARES Act.
Okay, so we'll make up a good portion of the overage in that, right?
Correct.
If not most of it. Okay, very good. And I think in general, it's safe to say, unless somebody has a question about a specific one of these line items, I think it's safe to say that we're, while we're over on expenses for all understandable reasons, the revenue is far in excess of the overages on the expense. So we stand at currently where we should be about 315 year to date. We're at 380, 394, I think it is. So we're 80 some $1,000 in the black, and that we anticipate that.
Dave,
Go ahead. Sorry.
my internet signal seems to be breaking up a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
Now we can. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple of points on the expenditure side. This has been a continuing issue that we've talked about for some time. The Baird Avenue loan payment
Right.
payoff actually showing on the expenditure side, and it really was paid for out of infrastructure funds. There's also an equipment asset purchase in there that really could be accounted for differently too. It was really paid for out of other funds, and really was not an expenditure item that should appear here. And I will note that Bill Stevens on the call on our earlier meeting today indicated that he had been talking with the accountants about a better way of accounting for some of these things.
Right.
I don't know if he's been successful yet in resolving it. I think he still has to do a little more thinking and maybe discussing about it, but I think it's good that he's working on that.
Yes.
And I would also note just one other thing, that going forward, Bill is actually going to be the liaison to this committee. I'm going to continue to stay involved as well, but Bill will be the official liaison. So I think that'll be an asset for the committee.
Very good. We asked for someone not as tall, so. That's also, yeah, and I think Bill, as he communicated in the meeting earlier, said that a couple of the items would kind of roll off this and roll into the balance sheet instead, or something that would.
Right, and those are the items I'm talking about, the Baird
Yeah.
Avenue loan and
Right,
the equipment
which
program.
would result in nearly an extra 100,000 in, the picture here to the positive. So I think overall, we're in very good shape, year to date. The issue of the bonuses, the year-end bonuses, did come up in the commissioners' meeting, and Jim Dedes is authorized to go ahead and issue those. Sorry about the cat. And so it didn't require a vote from the commissioners, and so that's been approved and will be done prior to the payroll cycle in December, right? So all is good. That's a total of $8,500 or $8,250, depending on whether Jim wins the battle of not taking a bonus. So, all right. So, does anybody have any questions about the current status and where we look as of year to date here? Okay.
Yeah, one thing, there is a lot of building going on. I'm amazed that the permit is not tracking with the transfer taxes.
I don't know what to say about that, but I hear you, Lynn. It's you would think that it isn't just the sales of real estate; it's also the building and the improvements that are going on. Although now is, I guess, the beginning of the real time when people start to do those things. So I think Jim indicated he's expecting to see that bumped up significantly.
Right. I mean, there's some crazy stuff going on. There was a house on Baird there that somebody renovated a couple years ago, and then they just, I guess, a couple months ago, they blew it away.
Yeah, right across from the water tower.
Yeah, right. That kind of puzzled me a little bit. But
They,
stuff like that, and I mean, you look around, there's just all this other stuff. And that whole road that sits behind me there, they've been having construction over there for a long time. We should be getting a lot of money out of them.
Well, and that's all to the good, and I think we all are happy to see that. I'll remind that, we do have an economy that, while it's holding its own right now, there's a lot of things that I think could begin to affect negatively in beginning next year. While we hope that, there's no significant downturn, I think that, and coupled with the resurgence of the COVID, I would suggest that we keep some version of the budget coming up that Sheena and Jim are working on that will also be maybe not as tight as the one that we did for the beginning of the COVID this year, but we keep that same kind of process in mind when we budget, which is to make sure that we have I think, there's a best case scenario and there's a base, at least two. We'll talk more about that in the next meeting. I know Sheena has been working on the budget extensively, and maybe by December's meeting, we'll have a first draft of that to begin to look at. Does that sound right, Sheena?
I've already started on it, and I really underestimated the revenues basically on our revenues so far this year.
Yeah, but hold on a minute. I would not adjust up based on that. I would just give it what you think would be the norm, that coming in, as we did last year, and then we'll adjust accordingly, because with the potential of the economy, doing something negative next year, we don't want to be too optimistic that there's going to be another year of transfer tax like this and so forth.
Oh, no, transfer tax, I'm going very low. I mean, as far as parking permits and things like that, I'm going with what we've gotten this year. So I'm being very conservative on my revenues this year.
Okay, good. All right, very good. So do you think by the next meeting on December 12th, we'll have a first draft of that? I don't want to press, but it would be helpful to at least see a first version.
Oh, I would have liked to have had it by today, but I'm just lazy. So you will have it by December.
Okay, that's great. And maybe a couple of days before the meeting, so we can at least have a quick look before we get on the meeting on Saturday. Okay, very good. Then we'll take that up at that time. But I would suggest in working with Sheena's first draft that we start to look at, what could happen if the economy does start to take a turn for the worse through the COVID and the general economic trends, and we make sure that there's no surprises. We had to react and respond well earlier this year because of the COVID situation, but forewarned is forearmed, so at least we'll plan accordingly. Any other questions about the budgetary stuff year to date? Okay. On the revenue streams, and I think there has been a great deal of discussion over the last several years as to, let me go back to this. We don't need to share the screen here. I know that in the earlier 2 years where I was chair of the committee here, we did a lot of work on trying to come up with what we thought were good, solid, stable revenue streams for the town to move forward. And that under Bill's leadership last year, there was some additional work done in that area. I also know that the hotel tax is moving along at all due speed. Gary, you might know best about that. Can you tell us where that stands at the moment?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that really has been passed by the state legislature, as far as I know. And what we could do as early as the beginning of this next fiscal year, we could impose a 1.5% tax, which could go up by 0.5% each year after that, up to a maximum of 3%. We have not begun to discuss that among the other commissioners, whether or not we would want to impose that at this time. But that is the earliest point at which we could do that.
So it is still with the legislative process complete at this point, if the ball is back in our court in terms of enacting it for the town?
It is my understanding that the legislature has signed off on it, which means the governor has signed it as well. And so, yes, it is in our court to choose whether or not we would wish to impose such a tax,
Okay.
and when we would like to do that.
What I'd like to do then is make that a bullet on our next meeting and talk about that among the group and see if we can come to a consensus as to what we think is the right thing to do. And if we can then, if we agree and vote to do so, we'll push it up to the council to consider and get the process started there in the discussions. Does that sound?
Sounds good.
Good. Now, the
Can we
other,
get any input? Can we get any input by the taxees? What the impact might be on the principal people who are paying that accommodation tax?
well, there would have to be a public hearing, at least one public hearing on the topic anyway. So probably
Okay.
more than one. So yeah, that would be part of the process.
Okay.
Excuse me, there are other forms of revenue that we could begin to look at. Back in 2019, when Scott was just finishing up the season, we had a line item that was for him to commence a process to try to capture the accommodations tax that we know is not being captured with some of the rentals that don't buy licenses or report their rental income. Is anyone aware of any activity that took place in that respect in the last year or so?
He worked with UD, and
Say
they had a
again?
fellow. Scott worked with University of Delaware,
Okay,
and they had a fellow that was supposed to come down here and work, but because of COVID, he just put. He did some research and put it about how to start looking for stuff. I think Jim and Dale have already talked about contacting UD about continuing that in a more in person this year.
okay. Specific to the accommodations tax recoup, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'll talk to Jim about that and we'll see where that stands and maybe have some report on that by the next meeting.
Dave, can I make a comment?
Please.
A year or two ago, I made the recommendation that on the form that is sent out to all property owners for about the beach tax, that there be a line on there, I do rent my property, yes or no. If that goes out, that would give us the start of a database of honesty, things to check. People say no, now we'll see if it's a rental. And it never happened because there was a changeover, town manager, what have you. But that is still a recommendation of mine if that can be done.
What time of the year does that beach tax notice go out? Do we know?
It goes out, it'll be going out in about end of next week.
End of next week?
Yeah.
Ah,
Could this happen then, Ashley?
I would just have to double check with the solicitor to make sure, with it being a tax bill, they're very strict with us on what information can be on it. So I would just have to double check with him on that to ensure that additional information not related to the tax is permitted to be on it.
I'm almost positive we went through this almost 2 years ago and somebody dropped the ball in town hall. It happens.
Ashley, would you check that with the town solicitor and let us know whether that's possible to do? I mean,
Yeah,
it could be as simple as a yes/no question to give us at least a bar of, acknowledges that there is rental. We don't want to make it any more complicated than that.
Do you rent your property?
Yes. Do you rent your property? Yes or no?
sure. Yeah, we are going to be sending the accommodation tax form out with the tax bill in the same mailer. It's just going to be as a separate form, but I can ask the solicitor if it can be on the same form.
We might also want to do it for the, the accommodations tax solicitation that comes out in the spring, right? That comes out later on. But at least for the tax bill, especially since there's such a tight time frame, let's see, what the possibilities are for that. Phil, I think that's an excellent idea. It may not capture a lot, but if it gets any, it's worth doing, right? So,
Yep.
and it gives us a basis to go on to follow up with Jim and the person who can be assigned to do the research and work for us on that. And we'll pick that back up because, I think we all know intuitively that there is additional revenue out there that we can capture. I don't think anyone could tell us how much that is, but it's worth going for because it's, it's just it's the right thing to do. One other item that was on our list for that was to revamp potentially the set-aside accounts. And Gary, I know you've done some work with the council on that in the last year. Can you give us an update on where that stands?
Yeah, we really did take care of that already. I think we voted a few months ago to eliminate a couple of accounts and consolidate them. We're basically taking money, we're still taking the same percentages from transfer tax and from parking revenue, but we're putting it in different places. We're putting some of it into more into infrastructure and more into basically kind of a reserve type account. Putting most of it into the Brown Advisory account. And I think we're with a good budget year this year, I think we're beginning to get to the point where we can begin to look at the money that we have in those reserves and begin to think about how we can begin to use some of those reserves to start a capital expenditures account. But we in a sense still have a thing like a rainy day fund and a transfer tax recoupment account, but we don't call it that. It's really been streamlined, and I think put it in a more appropriate place for us to begin to draw on.
And so the rainy day fund, I was just about to ask you about the rainy day fund. That hasn't, the money's still there, but it's been relabeled as something else.
It has been put into a different account. I do not recall off the top of my head if that went into the Brown Advisory account or it went into infrastructure, but we did beef up both of those in the reallocation of those set-aside accounts.
Okay, so that's been handled the one time, and everything now is reorganized what we think is properly at the moment. And it takes some doing. It has to be started or seeded through us, and then goes up in the. I think Gary, you were the one who spearheaded really the whole process with the council, and I thank you for doing that. It's important work. In your estimation, how often does that need to be revisited? Is that something we should revisit every year or every couple of years?
I don't think so right now. I think I think it would be better to focus on thinking through what issues there are in terms of developing a capital expenditures account.
Right.
And we have some real need for expenditures to replace equipment and police cars and that sort of thing. And we need to look forward and see how we accumulate those resources necessary to have that kind of an account.
Very good. And so Sheena, let me bounce a question over to you since you're working on the budget. Has there been any discussion in town hall about creating more of a formal capital expenditures budget?
I've asked each of the department heads to give me their wish list. And I plan on taking their wish list and trying to figure out how we can start building that into and building money to accommodate those wishes.
Okay.
I'm hoping that you'll let me off this year and that when we get this new town manager in, that he or she can work with me on fulfilling that wish.
Okay. Can we, as an interim step, it'll depend, I guess, on the timing of everything and how quickly we can, mobilize this effort. Do you need help from an accounting standpoint to be able to identify those things that should be earmarked in a capital budget versus an operating budget, or is that something you're familiar enough with to be able to see that?
Oh, I know what items are capital and which are operating. It's just a matter of pulling the money out of whose ear. Okay.
Can we at least begin to segment that in the budget draft so we can see what that kind of looks like, and then we can make a decision on how how formal we call this our first capital budget or not, as the case may be.
No problem.
Okay. At least we'd be heading in the right direction because we've been talking about this capital budget for a couple of years. It's at least we can make baby steps towards it. It would be helpful at this point. We may end up finding that we've got a pretty good handle on it, thanks to the good work you've done and are doing. Okay. There was another bucket that we had come up with over the last couple of years that had to do with implementation of what I would call, I guess, an infrastructure or a Bayside tax, which would be focused on that and would be applied. I think that's a longer term discussion for us to have, and we'll take that up in the next month or two as we work through the process to see what we think is necessary. I have a tendency to try to be optimistic about the future, but I also am a realist, and I see that there are a lot of things that could affect us negatively in 2021. I think we have to make sure that we've got some fallback on that, and I'm sure Mr. Keenly would agree with me. He's that kind of guy. Jim, Joe?
No doubt.
No doubt, you agree. Okay, so anything else that you'd like to talk about? We'll have a more formal discussion and start to do some more brainstorming on additional revenue streams in the next couple of meetings. Jill, what were you going to say?
Just a couple of things. One, I thought there was a form once upon a time that said, yes, you rent, or no, you don't rent, or I don't know, maybe that was back in the day. But as far as this past year goes, I mean, people might have intended to rent and then didn't because of COVID. So that, and I don't know what will be this next coming year, but one thing I had talked to TJ about before was, and I don't use VRBO, and but I know that VRBO offers or has the capacity to directly pay the town an accommodation tax, but it has to be set up like with the town in order to do that. And I think that people, if it's possible to do that, would do it that way because it's easier than them collecting the tax and then having to pay the town. So, I mean, that's one thing that maybe could be investigated. And the other thing is, as far as the transfer tax indicating a lot of properties have been sold, and I do think that the people that are buying these properties, they are, it seems, not going to be short of cash to do whatever property improvements they're going to want to do, and which will involve getting building permits. But one of the things that I've noticed during this COVID time is that I've gotten permits for myself. I've helped friends get permits who haven't been here, and I've kind of helped them get permits to get work done. And I've not only done it in Dewey, but I've also done it in Lewis and Bethany and Delmar. And so I feel like I've gotten them all around Delaware, many places. And it's really hard to get a building permit in Dewey. You kind of get, you don't get a quick answer. And I don't know if there's a way that we could streamline it, or maybe if somebody needs help in this department, getting back to people and responding and getting permits out. I mean, it's just something I think maybe should be maybe checked out, because I think it is a great source of revenue. And also, I don't think we want to antagonize people who are just getting into the process for the first time. And it's just something that I wanted to mention because it is a good source of revenue.
Okay.
So.
I think Jim, as the acting town manager, and the incoming new town manager will be the person really responsible for looking at that process. But it's good input. And if you've had experiences like that, chances are others have as well. And so I have to talk to Jim anyway about these other things. I'll ask him to, take a look at that as well.
Okay.
One of the
Hey,
things, one more thing. The VRBO thing, yes, you're right. It does. They do offer to collect the tax and pay the town directly. Some people opt in and some people opt out. I don't personally. I collect the tax and I pay the town. But you have to also remember that VRBO is only one of many. The realtors obviously, get involved in that too. And there's, it's a big model and there's lots of combinations and complications. So it's a start, but yeah, it's something that we can begin to look into. Sorry, who was asking to speak?
That was Lynn.
Lynn?
Question I had asked before, and I don't know whether we ever got a definitive answer, was on the Rehoboth by the Sea leases. Those leases that have gone from like $600 a year to $18,000 a year.
Mhm.
It seems to me we ought to be able to nip a little bit at that. I don't know. I know there was some saying, no, we could, no, we couldn't. And I don't know whether we ever got a definitive answer on that.
Okay, well, that's an interesting one.
I mean, they're making a lot of money. They're making a lot of money off our infrastructure. So.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of how we would address that, who we would bring that up to get a read on whether there's a possibility there. Anyone have a feel for that?
Dave,
Gary?
my most recent ground rent on Jersey was $28,000 a year. So there's a large possibility of revenue income if we could find a way to have an accommodation on leased land payments.
Okay.
Solicitor General or the town attorney.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the place it has to start, is for a discussion with the town solicitor, is my sense. To see what's the rules of the road with something like that. Let me make a note of that. 1 second.
Are we talking about Rehoboth by the Sea paying this, or?
Yeah, that's that.
No, what we're talking about is the people who buy a house on, say, Salisbury Street or Jersey Street. They pay $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Plus they're on leased land, and they re-up their leases because all those 60-year leases are now pretty much done. So if you had a house there and you went to a new lease, it would go from $600 a year lease to $20,000 a year.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of money moving around there, is what I'm saying, and I don't know whether we could nibble a little bit at it.
Okay, let me, I'll take that as to be looked into, and, find a way to get some information on that to move forward and see. I think that's appropriate at this time.
Phil, did you have a comment on that?
This was a discussion a couple of years ago, and interestingly enough, the new property owners coming in to Rehoboth by the Sea and looking at that land lease cost didn't faze them a bit, because they said it's just like a property tax. But whether we can get revenue from it has never been asked that I know of, and that makes a lot of sense.
Could be a significant source of revenue if there's a way to, tap that.
Well,
Right.
It's a rental. You can call it a lease, but it's a rental. You're renting the property. It's a question for Fred, I think.
Yes, at the very least, as a starting point, that makes sense.
Right,
Dave,
well, I don't know,
Dave, and
is Rehoboth
David.
by the Sea paying the town any money?
Say again?
Does Rehoboth by the Sea pay us any money?
Um,
Their headquarters are in town, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, if they're a real estate agent in town, they might be, and have an office in town, they could be paying a license fee.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that any of the revenue that they receive in terms of the land lease revenues, I don't think there's any, I'm not sure how we would tax that. It wouldn't fit the definition of accommodations. They clearly have to be able to make some changes in the ability to do that. It might even involve the charter, since the accommodations tax, I believe, is embodied in the town charter. So, but it's certainly worth asking the question. You can't hurt
Or
to
unless
ask.
we get it as a part of the transfer tax, the leases, whatever. Yeah, let's look into that.
Yeah. Joe?
Dave, are there expenses related to those leased land lots? Services by the town of Dewey Beach, water, sewer, police, trash? If there are services that are directly connected to those leased land lots in the town of Dewey Beach, there certainly could be a tax on that, or a service charge for those services.
Okay.
and the related expenses.
Okay, well, let me start the process of, getting some insight on that. I want to bring up one other thing, and then I'd like to close out for the day. We're getting close to 4:45. A topic came up today in the council meeting talking about the committees, and there was some discussion of taking the investment committee and putting it under another committee rather than have it be its own. Joe, you and I have had discussions about that a couple of times over the years. And as Dale reported, it was floated to put it under the audit committee, and Julie Johnson, who's the head of that committee, said, please don't do that. But it's always made sense to me, and Joe, we've talked, that it may make sense to have investment be like a subcommittee on the budget and finance. Anybody have a thought about that?
That would make more sense than putting it with the audit. The audit has to be separate.
Right.
Period.
Dave, I have been committee members. I have been a long-term supporter of that. Subcommittee of Budget and Finance be the investment committee.
Okay.
There are lots of potential tie-ins. There are lots of potential information sharing. There are lots of potential fund moving around to increase our revenue. So I would support that.
Okay.
If
I
I
would
could
do
make a
that and
motion, I
talk
would.
to Bill and Paul and TJ. That makes logical sense.
Okay. Phil, you okay with that, or with taking that idea forward?
Absolutely.
And Jill, how about you?
Yes,
Jill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll mention to Dale that Budget and Finance is willing to take that on if the council so decides that that's something that they want to consider doing. By the way, in terms of our participation this year, I think this is actually considered still an interim meeting. We're still not officially the next fiscal year budget committee here. But I would encourage and hope that all of you will continue to participate. We will keep these meetings brisk and to the point, and hopefully accomplish, what we need to here. Nancy McCluskey opted out. She said she didn't want to do any more committee work, but is everyone here willing to continue on for the coming year's participation?
I am.
yes,
Yes,
And Joe, are you now a property owner in Dewey?
not yet.
Okay, so you'll still be a non-voting member, right?
That'd be fine with me.
Okay, when you say not yet, is there something imminent, or you think you're still made down the line?
Not eminent, down the line, very possible.
Okay, so we'll keep the same status for you, but thanks
better
everybody.
hurry up, Joe. The prices are going up every day.
They sure are.
Anybody, one thing before you guys leave, if I could add my 2 cents for something real quick.
Please.
I love stats. I mean, doing sociology, criminology, and statistics is always a part of it. It's kind of fun to look at what you sent out with the color coding, and it's easy to look. I'm Polish, so I need all the help I can get. And I know you always take out like the highest and lowest parts of averages and get rid of them. The transfer tax is way out of whack. We all know why. So we didn't even think about that. That's bonus on our part this time. Some of the expenses we had, and I'm spitballing, I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying when you ask for revenue streams, and I've talked to people when I go to DEMA meetings up north, and nobody understands how Dewey Beach operates because we don't have a guaranteed revenue stream per se, i.e. property tax. We have a lot of people in hotels and rentals that pay their 3%, their 6%, whatever the budget is. Property owners like myself who live here year round, I pay a beach tax of $252 a year, and that's it. But just looking at some of our administrative expenses here, I went through some of the bigger ones that we've had that because of COVID and just regular items, we're like at $546,000 is what it costs for town operating expenses, the seasonal police, the regular police, maintenance, code enforcement. Out of 1,440 properties, I roughly estimated in town, a surcharge, a whatever you want to call it, of $400 comes to $576,000, which more than covers operating expenses. I know towns like Rehoboth, towns like Smyrna, they're talking thousands of dollars of imposed finances towards people. I just say look at it. I'm not saying I'm a proponent of taxes. I'm not a proponent of opening up my checkbook if I don't have to. But for people who don't pay anything to live in our town, who get police, who get lifeguards, who get infrastructure, we're getting a great bargain here. And your numbers and everybody, Sheena's and Ashley's and everybody who's put everything together here is wonderful. Like I say, I'm just going through this from today when I was looking at stuff and just came up with just some rough numbers of what a minimal amount of expense on a individual's part means to the whole town overall.
Yeah.
My 2 cents.
Well, there's lots of ways you can skin the cat on that. I agree with you, but also there's, things like being able to move certain beach-related costs into and under the beach tax bucket, right? Which is, has a significant chunk of money in it. There's those kind of discussions as well. So in the next meeting or two, where the budget will be the focus, but we'll also start to look more deeply at some of these revenue streams that, we think we can put together and begin to, vet and investigate and take forward. So
Thank you.
I have to run soon here, but any other business that anyone would like to bring up today?
I move we adjourn.
Dave, thank you.
Oh, sure. Do we have a second for ending?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Cheers, everybody. It's happy hour.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.